How you doing, friends? I am Joe Craig. I got the logo in the background. Today's topic is called the school to prison pipeline. Every time I go to the ISS room, it's all mostly black kids. And I'm asking myself why. And I guess the key word is subjective discipline. That's right, subjective discipline. That simply means that it's my choice to write you up subjectively, or I could give you a pass, or I could give you a warning, or I could expel you just because what I say. Now, let's get into this right quick because I think it's very interesting.
One of the most disruptive is the process by which students are funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile justice system. It's called the school to prison pipeline, and there is increasing evidence that it starts as early as preschool. The school to prison pipeline primarily victimizes Black students, trapping them in a cycle of incarceration.
Because of their race, sex, and the socioeconomic status.
Increasingly, schools are cracking down on small offenses, such as cutting classes or being disrespectful. This is supposed to discourage more serious infractions like drug or weapons possession, but what constitutes as disobedience or disrespect can be very subjective. A study in Texas found that 97% of the state's suspensions were made for subjective reasons, made at the discretion of school administrators, and Black students were 31% more likely to receive discretionary suspensions than white students. Disparity can start as early as preschool, when 48% of preschoolers who are suspended more than once are Black. African American boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts, and Black girls are suspended at higher rates than any other race.
I want to believe every student is destined for success. They want to achieve, but more times now we can't control certain things what happen in their homes. I had a student years ago, by the time they got to school, they said, hey, I walked through a crack house facility, prostitution. When I get here, I walk through a metal detector and people bother me. And I haven't eaten since lunch yesterday. And you're asking me to sit here in class and learn? There's a challenge.
When students
I've heard about the crime. I've heard about everything. But I'm still going to say this, folks. It still starts in the home, in pre-K, 2, 3, 4 years young.
are kept out of school as punishment, they miss lessons and assignment and fall behind academically. They are more likely to be disciplined again, which can lead to further problems. The Texas study found that students who had been suspended or expelled were twice as likely to drop out. Adding to the problem, police officers stationed inside schools. When these officers react overzealously to minor infractions, they make small problems worse. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. As widespread protests emerged after George Floyd's death in police custody, Minneapolis School Board voted unanimously to end its contract with the police department. And there is pressure from students, educators, and activists around the country for other school districts to do the same. And
Kids came in from a 3-day suspension. They did something. They got sent back out for 5. What I realize now, well, I realized it early on because I quit doing it, that when a kid is not in school, they out there doing all other kind of stuff, which I showed you in subsequent videos. So what we have to do, folks, again, I think it starts at home. I think the parents need to be in the schools more often. But here's the other reason why it's not happening.
As a racial diversity problem. Although more than 56% of public school students are Asian, Black, and Latino, almost 80% of its teaching force is white. Those who make and implement K-12 policy decisions for communities of color are pretty white too. 77% of principals are white. 89% of superintendents are white. and 79% of school board members are white. This stubborn problem is a result of a few things: historic and contemporary systemic racism, state and district K-12 policy decisions, and racial biases in the hiring process. This mismatch and racial representation between students and educators deprives communities of color access to stable, middle-class jobs, and more importantly, it's a big reason why white students continually outperform students of color, according to several studies. Since its beginning, America's teaching force has been made up of mostly women, who administrators perceived as cheap, accessible labor. While teaching was one of the few jobs available to black professionals in the Jim Crow South, white school board members limited the number of schools available to black students. Those schools were typically understaffed with underpaid teachers.
Yeah.
In the years after World War II, states started consolidating school districts and standardizing the hiring and licensing process of teachers. While teachers band together in unions to fight off the new mandates, many unions disallowed teachers of color from joining. Orrick Brown v. Board of Education decision, which ended the legal segregation of America's public school system, was counterintuitively devastating to black teachers. White superintendents of the newly integrated school districts were hostile toward putting black teachers and principals in charge of white students and began to lay off tens of thousands of credentialed black educators. According to one estimate, in the 17 states with segregated school systems, between 35 and 50% of teachers were black. Today, only 7% of teachers and 11% of principals are black. And America is pretty bad at hiring from other communities of color too. Latino students today make up almost a quarter of the entire public school enrollment, and yet only 9% of teachers are Latino. When it's time to be promoted to leadership positions, educators of color disproportionately struggle. According to one study, black assistant principals had to wait more than a year and a half longer than white candidates to be promoted into principal positions, and were 18% less likely than equally qualified candidates to be promoted. Because school board members are mostly white, they're far more likely to hire a white person to lead their district.
Now that's where the problem begins. Because most of my teaching career, I've only been at two schools that they had over 15 black teachers. Washington High School, and there was a lot at Grandview High School where I was at. But other than that, it was only a few of us. And then when you have only a few of us in the classroom, what really happens is everybody else, like the guy said in this video, they look like them. Culturally, they never understood where the black kids was coming from. Like if a black kid raised their voice, they took it as being disrespectful. But they don't know the culture. They don't know any culture. I'm gonna step out on faith in my point of view. Many non-black teachers I came across, yes, there were a few that were compassionate, but a lot of them did not relate to our kids. So it went back to subjective discipline. Do as I say and not as I do. And if you do, I'm going to write you up. I used to see a lot of teachers go to the main offices of some of the schools I worked at, and they would be getting stacks and stacks of referrals. But I'm going to tell you why I never wrote up a lot of kids. I remember my first teaching job. The principal told me, she said, Joe, if you send kids out of a classroom, you giving away your power. Now, mind you, I came into education from a business background where I supervised people. So the kids were my clients. And so you wasn't about to get out from under my control. So when a teacher told me, Joe, you the principal of your classroom, I was like, like a little puppy, not understanding. I got it. So after that, I didn't send anybody out. You got to go through me. I'm the principal.
And in this documentary, we'll be taking a look at some of the most concerning ones. First concern, high rate of black imprisonment. One of the biggest concerns in the black community today is the alarming rate of black incarceration. As far back as 1970, blacks made up just 11.1% of the total American population. But would you believe it if I told you that they accounted for more than 46% of the people locked up in correctional facilities in the entire country? Let me make it clear. America has a total population of about 300 million people, which means 11.1% of that is about 33 million. So, how can a population as small as 33 million make up more than 46% of people locked up in American prisons? So how do those numbers look now? Well, the stats are still not encouraging. This is because as of 2024, blacks are still topping the charts in terms of races going to prison.
Programs of the drug war continued targeting low-income communities of color with more police, more surveillance, and eventually more incarceration under much harsher sentences.
The black community still has an outrageous representation in American prisons, as about 30% of inmates in 2024 are black.
And I walked out of prison with a lot of optimism, despite being told by the officers that I would probably be back in 6 months.
We had 3 or 4 pods, and most of the kids between the ages of 14 and 17 were black. I'm going to say it again, folks. It starts in the home. Let's roll this right quick.
Have shown that Black students and students with disabilities are more likely to be subjected to exclusionary disciplinary practices that compromise their opportunities to learn.
Exclusionary discipline is any action that removes or excludes a student from the classroom. This includes in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, expulsion, law enforcement referrals, school-related arrests, and restraint and seclusion. A 2018 U.S. Government Accountability Office
It's probably
report
worse now in
found that Black students
2024.
represented over 15% of all K through 12 public school students, but 39% of students subjected to out-of-school suspension. In other words, Black students were overrepresented by roughly 23 percentage points. Similarly, students with disabilities represented 12% of the K through 12 student population, but 25% of students subjected to out-of-school suspension. That is, they were overrepresented by roughly 13 percentage points.
A number of studies on discipline disparities have demonstrated the negative impacts of exclusionary discipline. For example, a study on the School District of Philadelphia conducted by Mathematica and the University of Pennsylvania found that out-of-school suspension decreases math and reading achievement for suspended students. Our alliance takes an evidence-based approach to reducing the use of exclusionary discipline and eliminating discipline disparities. Working with the Maryland State Department of Education, the priority for our alliance was co-developing a study to understand the extent of disproportionate discipline in Maryland.
I'm gonna stop you right there. I was reading on the little line over there. I see where she going. Non-black students are suspended less likely than black kids for the same infraction. You see that little down in there, right? That's what she was getting ready to say. Let's see what she was getting ready to say.
We know that schools with disproportionate suspension and expulsion rates for certain groups of students, like African American or students with disabilities, is bad. We know that we need to remedy this, but first we need a good understanding of who these schools are and what their needs are. And that's what this project.
Start with the teachers first. Look at the referrals. Keep it moving. But folks, here's my point. Take care of your babies when they go to school. Start teaching them at home on how to act. Teach them what they're going to be going up against. Teach them how to read, how to understand, how to be critical thinkers at a young age. My name is Joe Craig, host of Reelin' and Tellin' Our Point of View. If you don't want our kids going to prison, like I told you, I worked at a prison. And it was sad to see them little young brothers locked up. But you know what the commonality was? They couldn't read and write. They knew how to hustle. They had game, but they couldn't spell cat. And so I just think, from my point of view, focus up on your education. It might not keep you out of prison, but it might keep you on the road to success or a better lifestyle. Focus on the kids in school. Talk to them when they come home. Ask them how their day was. Go up to the schools. Let the teacher see your face. Not in no slippers, not in no hair weave, not with your chest all out, female wise. Guys not smelling like alcohol. Represent, because that's what I do when I go to the schools. My name is Joe Craig. Keep it real. You can check me out on YouTube at Reeling and Telling Our Truth, on Facebook at Reeling and Telling Our Truth. You can even email me at the Greg Audrey Group at gmail.com or the Joe Craig Show at gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. As always, be blessed.